everyone, and welcome to another video on the ToLiss Airbus A321. And today we're going to look at what we would do after a missed approach. So after we've gone around, where would we go from there? So would we look at another approach into where we are, or would we try and divert, and how might we set that up in the aeroplane? As always, I am a real-world Airbus pilot, but this is not for any real-world use. It's just for our own home simulations to give you guys some extra context. So hopefully it's useful for that. Let's get started. So here we are in the hold at the waypoint Sugal. You remember this from my video on the go-around, where we do that into Amsterdam. So that's where we are again today, expecting the ILS runway 18 right in Amsterdam. And we're sitting here in the hold. So from here, if I go to my charts, you can see that we should come from Sugal, and it would be towards the airport, radar vectors onto this ILS. So how might we prepare for a diversion? Let's say we were concerned about getting into Amsterdam today. Maybe the runway is getting blocked with snow regularly. Maybe it's just too windy, something like that. And people are going around and diverting. So we might want to prepare in our MCDU. So let's see how we could do that. The first thing you need to do on the init page is make sure you have an alternate loaded into here. So my alternate today is Heathrow, Echo Golf Lima Lima, and I put that in. If you have used a SimBrief chart, you'll or a SimBrief briefing pack, I suppose, you'll have an alternate. If you go to page 2, and you should have one there, alternate route and airport, EGLL 9 left, and it's got a little route. And we can actually code that route in. So if I go to plan and zoom in just to show you guys, if we go to the flight plan page now, scroll all the way through. As usual, we check the coding for our ILS, and here's our go around. So the go around into Amsterdam takes us off to the right, effectively on that vector, Echo Hotel 624, and away we go. And then it says end of flight plan. Then it has Amsterdam, and then it has our alternate of Heathrow with the discontinuity. So what I can do is if I select next to Amsterdam, this blue one here, I can put in a departure. So you're not actually going to fly this. You won't fly the SID, but it's just useful for perhaps planning your fuel and your route roughly. But you wouldn't fly it because you're going to fly the missed approach procedure, not a SID. Now I'm landing on runway 18 right, but if we go to 18 right, there is actually no SID there. So if I put in 18 left, and I can see I need a vollard departure from the runway would be, in theory, the right direction. So I'm going to go for the Valco, just because I know that happens to take me off to the west, and I need to go to the point Idrid. And then I can insert that, and we can see here, there it goes. And if we zoom out, it's now drawn that from EHAM out and along, and I can scroll through, just as I would a normal flight plan. And it actually ends at Idrid. And if we look at our alternate, that's perfect, Idrid. But that's just, you'd have to just work that out looking at the charts, to be honest with you. Usually the runway you're landing on probably does have a SID, and you could use the SID that most closely matches this. But again, you're not going to fly it. You're not expecting to fly it. It's just a fuel planning sort of exercise. And now I have Idrid, and I can do lateral revision from Idrid, just as I would in the normal flight plan. Put in airway, Lima 980. And that's going to go to Logan. And then no need to insert it, it already seems to take it. Logan is my waypoint for the arrival. So then here's my Heathrow. I can select against that, choose an arrival just as you would in the normal flight plan. ILS, runway 9 left, and I expect the Logan 1 hotel. So now we have a flight plan. I won't put a buyer in. There we go. Now we have our flight plan all the way through, ending at Lambourne, and then we've got an ILS into Heathrow. So that gives us an idea of fuel, so we can get some timings out of it. It gives some speed restrictions. It's 36 minutes away. If I do that, I'll see how much fuel I'll arrive with. So it expects me to arrive at Heathrow 9 left with 1.6 tons of fuel. So that's good. That's a reasonable amount of fuel to be arriving with from a diversion. Our final reserves will be on page 1. That's what we must land with. Final reserve fuel today is 1.2, pretty typical for a 320 family aircraft with the current engines anyway. Neos obviously are less, but there we go. So that's the way we can code that into there. So now what we'll do is we'll go fly the approach and figure out what we would do after that. So if I go to my airport chart, my go around in Amsterdam takes me off and makes a right turn and then heads off on a vector. So I'd expect radar vectoring from there. So what I can expect to happen is if I was to divert, I'd head off on this vector and then probably get sent either radar vectors over towards one of my waypoints, or maybe they'll just send me direct to one of these points on my alternate route. So they could say direct to Idrid or direct to Abned, something like that. That's another possibility. This isn't the only way to do this, by the way. As we've seen in my MCDU video, we could, if say we'd gone around and we were now in the hold at Sugo, I could simply just go new destination and put it into here. But let's not do that. Let's go and have a look at flying the approach now and going around and then seeing what we would do. So here we are now on final approach into Amsterdam, and we can imagine for some reason we cannot continue with the approach. Something to point out is that I'm actually flap 3 now, which is my landing configuration for today. I haven't got the gear down, and you'll see there's no warner. It is possible to go fully configured with the flaps without any gear warner until you get the GPWS one later. In certain failure cases, it won't work like that, but yeah, it's quite surprising, really, unusual for any airplane to be able to be in its landing flap without the gear down, and it doesn't give you any warning, but it would eventually, as I said, with the GPWS. So for our go around here, we're expecting to go off and right, and then it's a vector, and expect radar vectors from there. So if you need help with that, that would be my radar vector video, which talks about that. In fact, I even do that in Amsterdam. So here we go, we're stable at 1,000 feet, but for some reason, let's say there's an airplane on the runway ahead, this is no good. So we're going to do our usual go around procedure. So I simply have to go through to Toga, move the flaps up one stage, check that everything's working, Mantoga SRS go around track, auto thrust, and so on is armed and ready, and up we go. Now we're above 1,000 feet, so it's already gone into outstar. We bring the thrust carefully back to climb. If you do that while it's in outstar, be careful because the speed could reduce, but there we go. Positive climb, gear up. Slightly out of order there, but there we go. And we're climbing away. And now we need it to sequence onto that go around. So if I push that, we'll get nav, and it should fly right turn, out and onto that vector. We'll bring the flaps to 1. And once we're above S speed, we can bring them to 0. And soon it will make that right turn, which we have here. So that's what we're expecting to do. Is there a speed limit in that right turn? It seems quite fast at 250 knots. It does warn do not overshoot that radial, so you might want to consider slowing down, because at 250 knots I suspect there's a chance we could. And off we go. So what would we do now? Well, if your company has a after takeoff climb checklist, something like that, then you would do that now, and then you consider setting up for another approach. If we were to return to Amsterdam, I could radar vector myself. Obviously, in X-Plane we don't have the luxury of air traffic control radar vectors. And what would happen in real life is probably that. You'd expect radar vectors downwind or something like that. There's a chance, say it was for bad weather and you wanted to go and wait, then you'd go and find a hold and wait somewhere. A lot of missed approach procedures don't end like this. They end with a hold. It's unusual to have just a straight line. I guess it's not too uncommon, but it's just a lot of them will have a hold somewhere for you to go and sit in and then work out what you want to do from there. So what we'll have a look at is how we would do that. So if I wanted to refly this approach, I would do my after takeoff climb checklist, and then I can just reactivate the approach phase in there, check that the data is still valid, check it's still got it all tuned, and here we go. It's got that entire arrival back through to RLS 18 right. So if I was going to radar vector myself, I would simply put myself into heading, and then just as I do in my other tutorials, I'd take my centrefix and draw a radial into it. The inbound course I think is 183, so we'll do our 003 radial in. We can see on the ND that that's now drawn a line out into space, so I can insert that. Make sure you re-pull the heading so that you get rid of nav mode. And there we go. Now we're in a position to fly another approach, and you do your approach checklist again if you're using an approach checklist or something like that. Not all airlines use after takeoff checklists or approach checklists. It does depend. The Airbus, obviously, with its ECAM memo, has a few ways of helping us even without checklists. So there we go. That would be one way. But I want to divert. Let's say I've changed my mind. So I've flown that missed approach, and now I want to divert. So I'll simply go to flight plan. And if you select a point like that, any of the lateral visions, so I can just go to or this point here, and then you see the little blue option, enable alternate. So I'm going to select that, and there it is. It's drawn our route that we drew in earlier. It comes up as a temporary flight plan. Press insert to insert it, and now, yeah, it's got this point. We don't want that. Then it's got Amsterdam all the way around and then our flight plan to Heathrow. Brilliant. So as I said, I would expect in real life, in the diversions I've done, the majority of it's done through radar vectors. They don't tend to expect to send you onto airways. This is a bit of a long diversion, I suppose, back to Heathrow. You'd probably find that maybe for this one they would give you an airway. So maybe they'd say route direct to Idrid. So what I have to do is ignore these first points because we're no longer using them. Direct to Idrid and insert. If they didn't do that and you stayed on radar vectors, remember, you need to delete each waypoint. So the points we weren't going to use, we could delete to make sure it sequences and we have the right fuel predictions and so on. And now you can see here, destination Heathrow 9 left. It's got a time, it's got a fuel on arrival, 1.7. It is expecting me to climb as well. You can see here, flight level 250, all the way up to 310. It's quite interesting, quite high. So you need to climb, obviously, you would burn a lot of fuel down here at 2,000 feet. And that is a way to set that up. And then you'd have to reset up your approach into Heathrow in the usual way. So put in the weather, activate the approach phase when we get there, and so on. So there's just a couple of extra things we can do after a missed approach in the coding of the FMGC to help us out. I hope that answers some questions. I had a couple of questions about what you would do after a missed approach. If you have any more questions, do keep them coming. I'm going to do some more Q&A videos in the near future. Sorry, it's been a bit light on videos lately. I haven't had as much time as I'd hoped, but that will return in June. So normal service should resume in June, and we'll get more videos and live streams coming out. We've still got my Discord, so in the Discord we will be posting when we're going to do another live stream, anything like that, and also we can ask questions and have a chat. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again in another video soon.